Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to this episode of Clay's Cortex, the podcast. Super excited. If you don't recognize the guy next to me, he was on a podcast earlier. It'll be linked. This is Scott from Vital Nutrition, and he's got his Fuel Logic shirt on, which y'all should check that out for sure. But recently, I've been getting a lot of questions from, well, parents will call because they're like, should they be taking this, right? And like, I'm not certified to be recommending those things. I'm more so trying to get people to think. And so I thought it'd be great to have this episode with Scott, who is a nutritionist, to talk about supplementation. We're going to cover a bunch of topics. We're going to kind of see where it goes. So we're super excited for that. So Scott, thanks for being here.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Round two.
Cool. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. It's always fun. I think we're going to get a workout in after this too.
Yes, exactly.
Sweet. I love it.
Rotation would be good.
I love it. No, yeah, and my background's in biochemistry and cell biology, master's in nutrition and dietetics, and that doesn't mean that you should take whatever I say and just, hey, Scott's the authority, I'm just going to apply this blindly, but it gives us the opportunity to kind of talk through these things.
Oh yeah.
And explore some of these questions that you're getting that we get all the time, stuff like that.
I mean, he probably gets them a lot more than me, but it's cool. I mean, Scott's a great resource, and then him and Susan, they run Vital Nutrition, which is great. And so we're going to talk about supplementation, and he'll probably talk about food and stuff too a little bit. But I get asked this question a lot, which is, hey, it's more like a statement. I want to take creatine. My friend said I want to take, or that they want to take creatine. I want to take creatine. It makes the muscles puffier or bigger, and we need it. And so, yeah, so I have these discussions with these kids, trying to get them to think. And so Scott's been a great resource on this. I mean, he's deep into it, right? I mean, that's what he does, right? I'm deep into muscles and movements and stuff, and so I'm excited to have Scott on here. So, simply said, like, do you recommend creatine for athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I think you jump into hey, I want to take creatine. My first question is why, right? Like, we got to understand it. I think if you are a strength power athlete, sprint athlete, something like that, and you don't know about creatine, I'm not saying you have to be taking it. You shouldn't be taking it, whatever. But you should know about it, right? I mean, it's that big of a deal. There's not a lot of supplements high on that list, right? I think sometimes athletes have big supplement cabinets and small fridges, and that creates a lot of problems. That creates a lot of problems. But no, creatine is probably one of the most studied supplements out there, right? It's been around for a stinking long time. Lots of research available. So, if you're in that world, if you're an athlete, aspiring athlete, a recreational athlete, you're just getting after it in the gym, whatever. It'd be crazy for you to not kind of know about it, understand it, understand why you are using it or why you aren't using it, for sure. So, a lot of my strength power athletes, sprint athletes, that kind of thing, are using it.
Yeah.
And is it the first thing we talk about? The very first thing we talk about? Probably not. But it is up there. It's, realistically, it's fairly easy.
Yeah.
Fairly easy to use when, used properly, when what you're doing, that kind of a thing. So it's kind of like a why not. So yeah, creatine. I think it's a big why. We said strength power, sprint, like those kind of applications.
Well, I guess let me pause there for a second.
Yeah.
Well, why not? Like, you keep saying strength power, right? So I think that's a huge thing to think about. He's talking about a specific goals you have, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a weekend warrior, whatever, like there's a specific use for it potentially, right? So why would an endurance athlete not want to take,
So I think it gets, let's jump into kind of understanding creatine. What is it? What does it do? That kind of thing, right? That's where we start. To not go on too big of a tangent, right? Like, it's really important to me that, my athletes using creatine or any other, nutritional supplement strategy, whatever, you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing, how it works, how to adapt, how to react, how to change things up as necessary. Like, that's hugely important because, I'm an authority, right? But, and that mentality shows a lot of like, hey, I trust you, just tell me what to do, right? It shows a lot of motivation, but at the same time, I find that it creates a lot of problems, right? Because you're like, well, I trust you because I see you as an authority, or you work with a lot of high level athletes, or you work with my friends or whatever.
Yeah.
But the challenge is what happens when some other authority figure comes along and says something else without justification. But you're like, well, I trust him too. He also works with athletes, but Scott, but him, and you're like, that's not how you evaluate information and evidence, right? Like, you have to understand why this stuff works, why it may or may not work for you, that kind of thing. So
I love that. Yeah.
You know, we take the time and we do this stuff.
I think what's cool about that is evaluating information, right? So it's whether it meets the goals, whether they know why, and so forth. And so I think that's super cool, man. That's almost like another podcast episode. Evaluating, you know, resources potentially. I don't know. It's interesting. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you know what I'm saying though? I think that's crucial. Like, I mean, if I think about it, like the reason why this topic came up and why I asked Scott, I'm thankful he's here to talk more about this, is that like, oh, I saw on Instagram this like dude Jack doing this. I'm like, okay. You know, or I, you know, whatever, like YouTube or whatever, which is fine. Like, that's fine. It's just, it's one data point, but how can you actually dive into this, understand some of the realness behind this? I mean, I think what's cool, and I've known this, and that supplement or that fact or soundbite that I say to people is like, it's the #1 most studied supplement when it comes to exercise. Yeah. Right. And that could change. There could be a new one out there, and, you know, so, but it's just interesting. So for strength and power versus endurance, not super good for endurance athletes.
It's really not. And I think there's some applications where maybe like when there's some cross training going on, right? Like you see like endurance athletes benefit from resistance training, from getting in the gym, moving weight, you know, moving their own bodies, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But creatine is effectively like an energy buffer.
Okay.
So our body does make a little bit of creatine, and we do get a little bit from the food that we eat,
right?
Okay, from, you know, animal products, meat especially, right? And which is why vegetarians actually in studies show bigger impacts from creatine supplementation, because they tend to have lower levels in their muscles. So creatine's an energy buffer, right? We think back to like, you know, junior high, high school biology, right? We talk about ATP is the cell, you know, the cell's energy currency, right? It's our energy currency in our bodies, adenosine triphosphate, our body's energy currency. So we need that energy, you know, we need that ATP when we're working out, right? For those muscle fibers to move and things like that, right? We won't go into, you know, I'm sure we can do an 8-hour podcast from you on that.
I know,
right? The power stroke.
Right. Oh yeah.
But so, you know, we don't have a lot of ATP just floating around our cells. Right. We don't want to just all the time be, you know, powering these random processes, right? You know, a bunch of energy floating around might be how cancer gets started or something like that too, right? So we don't have a lot of this energy just floating around our cells. Okay, what we do is we take that adenosine triphosphate and we store one of those phosphates, one of those high energy, you know, phosphates on creatine as creatine phosphate. Okay, so now we have adenosine diphosphate and creatine phosphate. All right, so when we need energy, when we need it really quickly, right? There's different ways of producing energy, of producing ATP. Right, we can burn carbohydrate, burn fat, right? It's kind of a slow process. Sometimes, you know, we need to run from a bear, right? Or we need to do some reps in the gym. We need to get under the squat bar. Right? We need energy really quickly. We don't have time for those processes to ramp up, right? Which is why we store some of those phosphates on. Creatine is creatine phosphate. So very quickly, we can turn ADP back into ATP, have a bunch of energy super fast. And so that's why we say creatine is kind of this energy buffer. We take in creatine, it increases stores in our muscles of creatine. We're able to store more of those phosphates on creatine as creatine phosphate. We have a bigger pool or bigger storage system for energy, right? So we're kind of increasing that pool. And now theoretically what we're doing is we're increasing our potential to create very fast energy, which is a roundabout way of talking about why we use it for strength power athletes.
Yes, exactly.
And not necessarily. And
so it's almost like, so when you supplement with creatine, it's almost like a like an emergency fund, right? Like when you want to tap into that, you can tap into it, right?
For sure.
That's an analogy I thought of, like when COVID hit here, we had to lock down. Like I have an emergency fund here at the business, and I was able to tap into that. I know a lot of businesses shut down and stuff, but that's kind of interesting. I think that's how I kind of hear. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah. Or shoot, you like, you know, you need a new piece of equipment, something breaks, right?
Yeah.
Or you need a new piece of equipment. I need it fast. You know, I don't have time to go sell some stocks and move some money around.
Move some Bitcoin.
I don't know. Yeah. My crypto's not liquid, Curtis.
I know, right? Yeah. That's kind of cool though, because I think the thing is like, again, with this talk too, and I know Scott's going to talk about this, or essentially he would agree with this, is we don't want to just take creatine. Like he said something about like a small fridge and a big supplement cabinet, right? Like, well, so what do you mean by that? Right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we have to take a prioritized approach to powering performance for anybody, right? Like we all have different goals in life, in the gym, outside of the gym, whatever it may be, on the field, off the field. I don't know, for competitive athletes, for weekend warriors, whoever we are, right? We've all got these goals. And I think it's just taking a prioritized approach to what's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck. Right. And we kind of look through that. And a lot of times, you know, we're spending $50, $100, $200 a month on supplements, and we're, you know, forgetting to think about, you know, daily energy intake, macronutrients, timing, stuff like that, that is highly beneficial. Right. But maybe we don't know as much about it or whatever. We don't understand how to implement it. So it's, you know, perceptibly more challenging. So we go spend a bunch of money on supplements and, you know, that maybe aren't as effective. Right. And we got to, you know, I feel like a lot of my job in the nutrition world is just helping people's actions match their priorities.
I love it. Ooh, I love it. Oh, that's heat. Y'all hear that? Having people's actions match their priorities, right? Their desires, their wants. That's fire. Anyways, that's a sick sentence. I gotta post that. That'll be the main one we post. As a clip. But yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the hard part is when it comes to those things, like I've taken creatine once I learned about it in school, like because I was afraid to take it in before I had the knowledge behind it, you know, because like I was always afraid of that stuff. Yeah.
And that's the thing is like, I mean, the more that we can understand about it, the more we can say, okay, hey, you know, reduce those fears, especially, you know, for parents or something like that, athletes who are tested, whatever. It's like, let's start to understand this, right? I mean, creatine's made up of 3 amino acids, right? You know, it's synthesized by our bodies. We get it from meat that we eat. So, you know, amino acids are just those building blocks of protein. Creatine itself is not a protein because it's just 3 amino acids. We wouldn't consider it, you know, this big protein, these long chains of amino acids, right? So, you know, it's not a hormone. It's not a steroid. It just got FDA GRAS status, generally recognized as safe, which is just cool. I mean, you know, it doesn't necessarily change a whole lot, but it's a bigger deal. I think it was like end of 2020 or something like that, but it just, what it showed, and it shows you, I mean, there's been thousands of studies really picking up in the 90s, thousands of studies, but it shows that effectively a body of evidence and a majority of practitioners, right, all agree this is very safe.
For sure.
Right. And in the right ways, in the right form, you know, third party tested, whatever, because you do have to be careful, because at the end of the day, the sports supplement market is, you know, I mean, one of the most, you know, when you look at supplements, it's one of the most, it's one of the most commonly kind of adulterated substances out there, right? It always tops the list of stuff that's, you know, stuff that's in there shouldn't be in there.
Right.
You gotta be careful.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about that too is like, you know, you said something too where it was like taking it properly, right? I thought that kind of hit me, right? Because like I get asked these questions, and I'd been from people that I trust, right? And also from like before I was like, hey, came back home during Christmas. I was like, hey, somebody I respect, like, hey, what do you think about creatine? You know, and I've been in class, we talked about it, so like that. And I was like, well, I see some people sometimes say load it. Right. Load it, don't load it, you know, whatever it is.
So I think there's a couple things to get right off the bat. One, creatine doesn't work acutely, right? It's not like, hey, I take it and then 30 minutes later in the gym, I have a better workout. Right. The only way that's happening is because of placebo. Right. Or they shove some caffeine in there. That's the secret to the sports supplement market. I feel so good because there's 100 milligrams of caffeine and everything. So it doesn't work acutely. You have to build up stores in your muscles, right? And that takes time. So you talk about a loading phase, right? Yeah. I like loading phases, especially for people who can handle it, who are on top of it. So you can take creatine, you can just take it consistently every day, right? And it'll maybe take 3-4 weeks to build up stores in your muscles, right? You typically, you know, you're able to build up stores another like 30 or 40%. Okay.
Which is huge.
So yeah, I mean,
That's
and
huge.
we'll talk about outcomes.
I
We
mean,
can definitely get to outcomes here in a sec. But you know, it does make a big impact. So we can take that time,
Yeah.
right, and just say, hey, around 5 grams a day, every day,
Yep.
right? Or we can load it. So I think the only challenge with loading creatine is the frequency with which you have to take it.
Okay.
Okay. Because if we're going to load creatine, we're theoretically going to take maybe like 20 grams a day.
Okay.
Okay. But we can't just take, 4 or 5 gram scoops into the same, shake
Yeah.
and just chug it.
Right.
Right. It's not as good for absorption, and that much solute going into your gut sometimes can draw a little bit of water, bloat you out, and then, cause diarrhea, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yikes.
So what, how's that feel under 500 or 500-pound bar?
I know, right? Oh man.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You carry insurance?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. So anyway.
We clean very well.
Yeah.
Fecal matter on the floor.
Well prepped for COVID. Anyway, so so what we do is we break up those dosages.
Okay.
Right, into a few different times throughout the day.
Yeah.
And so what that looks like is, 4 different times throughout the day, you're taking 5 gram dose. Right. Maybe it's with breakfast and then pre-workout and then post-workout and then, before dinner, after dinner. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes that can be challenging for people.
Yeah.
Right. It's not that hard, but we all got lives.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
When you're managing, sports and kids and family and work and all that sort of stuff, like that can be a pain. Yeah. So there's definitely options either way.
Yeah.
But I like that loading phase. Bump those kind of stores up faster, right? Because a lot of people come in and we're already like, hey, I'm in the thick of it, right? I'm in the middle of a training cycle, or I have these goals, or I'm, I have a game in 2 weeks that's really important, or I have whatever. So we do that loading phase. If you got time, you got time. Yeah. Right. You don't have to do it.
That's interesting. So it's kind of like an individualized approach depending on where they are within their season and whatnot. I think that's kind of cool because I think there's a lack of individualization that happens. Like I just take like 5 grams a day.
Yeah.
That's all I do. I've been doing it for a while.
So I think we do that, that loading phase, and then you keep it up, right? You do 5 grams a day every day.
Yep.
And I think we see better absorption when it's taken with carbohydrate and around training.
Interesting.
Okay. Usually that's pretty easy. You should theoretically be taking in carbohydrate around training.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless there's some major reason not to be. But it's pretty easy to do, but it's better absorbed. We see better responses, better outcomes.
So the carbohydrate in that aspect, like a guy told me that take it with juice.
Yeah. Juice, applesauce, flavored yogurt, sports drink, mix it in with your protein shake that's got some other stuff in there. Yeah.
Stuff like that.
100%.
That's pretty cool.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. It makes sense, right? So like what that 30 to 40% hit me. Because I'm rereading Bompa's periodization book.
Okay.
Which is skewed a little bit, I think, because his athletes were taking another pharmaceutical, I believe. But great book. It's really good. But he was talking about in the book, if you're playing the way I read this was if you're an athlete playing a tournament, right, over weekend, so you're in Arizona or even it's here, getting replenished with carbohydrates post was crucial.
Yeah. I mean, you look at after a workout, right? Muscle glycogen resynthesis. Muscle glycogen, that storage form of carbohydrate in our muscles that we're going to access for somewhat quick energy. Yep. Not as quick as creatine, but a lot bigger store, right, than that creatine system. Muscle glycogen resynthesis is that's kind of highest potential post-workout, right? And so if we theoretically kind of miss those windows, delay those windows, it can be challenging, right? And when we need 5, 6, 7, 8 grams per kilogram carbohydrate or something like that, which is, hundreds of grams of carbohydrate. Like when you start putting those things off, like you're not eating 400 grams of carbohydrate. You're like going to Chipotle and like, I'll have 4 burrito bowls. Like, let's do this.
Seriously.
Like it's challenging.
That's kind of cool though. I mean, I think that number hit me because of like when you said 30 to 40%, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. I know we hear like, oh, like that's like some people, you might listen to like, oh, it's an F. I'm like, no. It's comparatively looking at that, like, it's a pretty big jump with giving you a leg up, especially with a lot of the like baseball, softball, right? Like I haven't had any girls ask me about creatine. Like, oh, I want to take creatine. You know, it's mainly dudes.
Yeah.
But thinking about it, how it can make a massive impact. But what I've also seen too is I'll say like, hey, bro, like this is a supplement. Like, what is a supplement, right? And I get them thinking about that too, because if they're able to clean up how they like, if they eat. Like, just make food at home. Like, I'm not trying to be rude about this, but like, I know that people are on the go, but prepare for the day. You know, if you know you're going to go somewhere, make a sandwich or something, or, you know, something that's like a better whole food option versus like, I'm not saying Chipotle is bad, but like McDonald's or Wendy's or, you know, like these quick options that may not be as beneficial to you.
Yeah, and they can be the best. They can be the best choice in the moment for a lot of people. You know, eating something's better than eating nothing, depending on what your goals are.
Correct. Yeah.
And depending on what your goals are, right? But that lack of foresight, lack of planning, stuff like that. And I mean, think about it gets expensive too. I mean, shoot, like think about what you could do. People have this misconception that fast food is cheap. It's really not.
It was good marketing. I mean, but that was really. I mean, maybe when we were kids.
Yeah.
It might have been,
yeah,
you know, but like that was really good marketing. And I look at now, so I don't want to get into that, but I get groceries now. It is significantly cheaper for me, and the amount that we get, because I eat a lot.
Even with inflation.
With inflation. You got eggs and milk, man, bro. Anyways, I'm not going that route, but yes.
And my only point there was just, you know, what could you do with an extra, you know, $50, $100, $150 a month? You know, what other experts could you employ to achieve your goals? What other strategies could you employ to achieve your goals when you're saving that kind of money? But that's tangential.
Yeah, I mean, it's massive. So like, I like to have that conversation of like eating quality food will make a better difference. And that's just teaching. And then there's another trick of like time management.
Yeah.
That goes back to like, okay, if you want to do a loading phase, are you managing your time?
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to get in this rhythm and routine and build this out over time, you know?
So and I think just figuring out how you use creatine, how you use these other foods and things like that. I think a lot of people go to like, you can't out supplement a bad diet.
Right.
And I think, you know, there's definitely an element of truth to that. Like you will always limit your potential if you're relying on supplements and you're not looking at what you eat, how you eat, that kind of a thing, right? You're always going to limit your potential. But at the same time, creatine largely works, you know, without those factors. So you're going to see across the board a 1 to 5% bump in, you know, performance metrics that are kind of strength power oriented. Regardless of your awesome diet or your not so awesome diet.
Right. It's just like it's like the cherry on top. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Especially if you lock those things in.
Yeah.
So I mean, so what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that creatine's not necessarily bad for you to take.
No, not at all. Not in the slightest. I mean, as you know, we talked about it being one of the most studied supplements, right? Thousands of studies, right? Reporting no side effects. Right. It's been tested in very young children, right? It's been tested in very young children with, you know, disease states, right? Things like that. Very old populations, athletes, football players, swimmers, you name it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? People who have been taking it for 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, right? And we get that a lot. Is it hard on the kidneys? That's not what the evidence says at all.
So here's my question with
that.
Oh yeah. No, I'm sorry. Keep going. I won't forget my question. Keep going.
No, it was that, and that was kind of like, you know, there was some early studies in mice that was like, oh hey, what's going on here? Maybe there's some issues. Bunch of research poured in, right? Never replicated any kind of results like that, right? I mean, we're bumping creatine stores in your muscles 30 or 40%. It's not something that your body's never seen before, never dealt with before, and that doesn't automatically mean it's safe. You know, you could be shooting testosterone. Your body's familiar with that too.
For sure, but
but you know, 1 to 2% of that is degrading into what we call creatinine every day. Your kidneys have to excrete that, like 1 or 2%, and we're really only bumping a little bit. We just don't see it, right? I mean, there's been long-term studies on impacts on, you know, kidney function, health, things like that.
Yeah.
We can handle it just fine.
For sure.
Yeah.
So why do you think it's been shunned upon, or parents get afraid of it, or you know, like I'm not trying to say parents be like, oh, I don't want to take that because blah blah. What do you think that is?
You know, I think it's not a bad response to be weary about supplements.
For sure.
Right. Like I think that's, especially with my athletes, when their first reaction is, I don't know, or, I don't think so, or I'm going to go ask Scott about it. Like that's the right response.
Yeah.
Right. We don't just start, putting stuff into our bodies.
Yeah,
but yeah, and you say duh, but it's like, I mean, I'm sure you get people in here,
Yep.
I get people that, come in taking all sorts of stuff, and
Uh-huh.
you're like, okay, this is just a waste of money.
Right.
This may be harmful, right? You can take too much of a lot of different
Yep.
stuff, right? So kind of sorting through that. So I get that like alarmist tendency, but yeah, there's a ton of myths out there,
Yeah.
right? Impacts on kidney function, impacts on hydration status or dehydration or heat tolerance, which we actually see, if anything, the opposite, that it
Yeah.
improves hydration status and
Which
heat
is
tolerance.
interesting, right? Yeah. Because I mean, I remember hearing that stuff growing up too, that like all these types of things, especially the hydration thing, you gotta drink massive water. I'm like, okay, you should drink. Honestly, when you think massive water, people just don't drink water.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's such an easy, I feel like it's such an easy recommendation from like someone who's maybe not knowledgeable, right? It makes you look smart, like, oh, you're taking creatine, like you got to drink a bunch of water with it. Like,
that's a whole other topic of imposter syndrome or Dunning-Kruger, or I mean, there's so many things, and I sometimes I hate to use. I mean, I was privy to some of these things, and I hate to use buzzwords. My goal here is to get people to think and make an appropriate decision for their body, right? I think what's interesting is you said like being a nutritionist when it comes to diet, and I thought like, there's a perceived level of authority. Same thing with people coming for training.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a lot of people that are predatory with that. Like if you were a nutritionist, which I know that you are, but you don't do this, is what I'm
right.
to say.
Right.
Like, oh, this is the Fuel Logic supplement line, and you need to buy this and this and this.
Yeah.
Like I understand that like we have to make money to live. Like I'm not trying to hate on that. Money isn't a bad thing. It is a tool. But on the flip side, you should be weary. You should ask questions. Like I tell people here, like if you ever think that I'm wrong on something, push me. And if I ever, which I don't get defensive, but if I ever get like pissed off, whatever, I'm like, then you should leave. And people are like,
I don't think I've ever seen you get pissed off.
Yeah,
maybe it happens.
Yeah, I get a little fiery, but I get frustrated. But no, like if somebody wants to, like I love discourse. Yeah. I love dialogue, and like I love this. Like I've learned a lot from this too, and there's been some refreshers too from like school and college and questions I had. But like, it's interesting because we should ask those questions and push back, because the person that is recommending this or the person that is prescribing, they don't have to live with the repercussions of putting this into their system. You know what I'm saying? I think that's what's cool. You're like, hey, ask questions. Let's have a discussion.
Yeah, no, 100%. And largely, I mean, the reason that we don't sell supplements is because we don't want that element of bias, right? Like when people come to work with me, I want them to get, if it's supplements, right? I want them using the best possible stuff for them at the lowest cost.
Yes.
As soon as you start selling supplements, that whole thing is like, it's out the window.
Yeah.
Right? Like, are you doing this because they need it? Are you doing this because you're making money? Are you, if they could go to you or get it somewhere else and it's the same cost, you're going to say, oh, get it from me. That's still an element of bias. Right. And so,
it's rare though, dude. Like, like guys, that's rare. That's rare. Like, that's how I function. Also, like, I buy stuff that I think will work well because people don't want to get like these toe spacers. I'll use the the toe spacers. Like, if you guys want a pair, I got them here because I don't want you to worry about ordering them. But like, my goal is to eliminate my bias, because like what helped me get faster in college was like developing the crap out of my hamstrings and doing a bunch of plyos. But I have some athletes that are not built like me. Yeah. And if I need to remove my bias. I do it with so many things. Like they're like, well, what supplements do you take? Like they'll see protein over there or something like that. I'm like, well, a company said I'm testing it out.
Yeah. Or it doesn't matter what you take. Like you're where you are, right? Like maybe they're not where you are, right? Or maybe they're trying to get where you are, but like, it's been a long journey for you, right? Or someone else. And it's like, you shouldn't be doing what this guy's doing. You get that all the time with, people looking up to professional athletes. And it's like, you're not there.
Gosh, that's money. Dude.
What's he doing? Doesn't matter. What did he do to get there? What can you do to get there? What are the differences between your situations? What are the similarities?
I love the mind shift right there, right? Like, yeah, it's okay to ask those questions, but there's been years of training with this guy. I mean, it's like, what would we taking to get there? Like you do long drive, right? I would assume that creatine would help with long drive.
Top 32, baby.
That's good, dude. That's huge. Right?
No, yeah. I mean, I do use it. Yeah, 100%. And I think, you look at forms of bias, right? And like, I think getting back to creatine a little bit, there's a lot of, push to forms of creatine other than creatine monohydrate.
Okay, let's talk about that. Yeah.
Different forms of creatine, right? Can be bound to other things, right? Monohydrate, it's hydrated with water, right? But there's creatine ethyl ester, creatine magnesium chelate, creatine nitrate. There's all sorts of creatines out there, right? The supply of creatine is so high and the market is so competitive that margins are razor thin. And so a lot of times what happens is people start trying to market things other than creatine monohydrate, potentially justify higher costs, things like that. Creatine monohydrate is probably one of the most affordable and most effective sports supplements out there.
Right.
And what we see in the research is, you get sales pitches, right? Like creatine ethyl ester survives, the stomach better, right? It's going to be better absorbed or whatever. It's not that's not what we see in the research when you look at outcomes. I don't care if you want to say it survives the stomach better. You don't get credit as an athlete for taking something that survives the stomach.
Right.
Does it increase stores in your muscles better? Does it improve outcomes? Right? Are we seeing those jumps in lean mass? Are we seeing those improvements, in reps towards the end, towards the end of sessions where I'm going to get a couple extra reps in here?
Which over time, let's just say those extra reps, say it's 3 extra reps and you train, I'm just going to say 5 days a week. That adds up quickly, like within a month's time.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the philosophy behind it, right? Is that it does impact performance, but it heavily impacts training.
Okay.
What do we do? And, I feel like a lot of what I do, right? And like, a lot of our stuff intersect, right? There's a lot of stuff that we can do with each other for athletes. And, what can I do to help them get more out of their workouts? You're putting 100% in the gym or wherever.
Right.
I'm not showing up, putting 100% in, getting 80 or 90 or 97% out of it. Like I'm gonna get everything out of it.
Right.
And so, if we can improve that training stimulus, right? I mean, what does that do over time?
Makes a massive difference. I mean, I did an online thing for a while, and I'll probably pick that back up with the education form of like once a week I talk about, because people train online at home, during the initial lockdown, and I would do educational days, especially for the athletes. Like, what are some things you want to learn about? People like, well, back health, whatever it is. And I did a talk about consistency of training. And I gave an example of like a kid who trains, 6 months out of the year.
Yeah.
Well, if you were to be general with this, they would have a training age of, 2 years through a 4-year high school period, right? If I'm being general with that. But if you're find a schedule where it's consistent, say it's 2 days a week. Like, okay, great. Because I know that like the sports schedules are nuts. Like they're nuts. Like it's softball's intense. I'm just like, dude, they're like, it's January. Yes. Why do I look at the clock? There's no, it's January and they're playing tournaments when really high school season will start like late February, March, and then they're going to go through the summer. So it's like trying to encourage them on how to train consistently, but do something consistently will make a big difference. And that's why I think it's interesting about creatine. Like it's not a quick hit, right? I know like you can buy, like he said, caffeine, at
least work in different ways too, right? Like you should probably know how to use caffeine, right? And whether to use it or not. But I mean, it's hard. There's a lot of confusion out there. There's sports seasons elongate now. I mean, NFL added extra games too. I mean, you wait till 2030, we're going to have 26 game season. You're going to get December off. It's going to be amazing for fans.
Yeah, it will be, but it'll be it'll be a war of attrition, that's for sure. I mean, it already kind of is in college athletes getting NFL and stuff. I think that's cool though. So creatine's not necessarily bad. So it'll impact, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like there's 3 main energy systems within the body, right? So you got Krebs, glycolysis, ATP, PC, right? So,
that's fair.
General. Well, how would you say?
100%. I think you can start splitting hairs, right? And you can start, saying, okay, hey, what are components of this?
Yeah.
Right. But 100%, right? How are we going to use these different energy systems realistically? And we're gonna burn fat. That's gonna be slow, right? It doesn't matter how fat adapted you are. Quick plug. It doesn't matter how fat adapted you are. You cannot burn fat and create ATP at as fast a rate as you can burn carbohydrate. It just doesn't. It's not possible. It's not physiologically possible. but you're burning fat, you're burning carbohydrate, you're using that phosphocreatine system, right, to create quick energy. I think that's totally fair.
Yeah, man, I think that's cool. So I mean, so creatine will impact mainly the beginning of that.
Yeah, it's that quick energy supply. It's those extra couple reps here and there in the gym. It's that 1 or 2% improvement on performance. But when you look at a 40 time, right? Like for athletes, I mean, if you can drop, half of a tenth or a tenth, that's massive. That's massive in a combine setting. That's massive in a one-on-one setting. What if you can elevate an extra couple inches when you're tired, or right? I mean, there's so many strong applications. You look at, baseball or something like that. What if you can swing an extra couple miles an hour faster?
It's I mean, the research
towards the end of the
that,
game.
Yeah, dude. The research behind that, and like, okay, here's the normative values for exit velo, or here's the normative values of, like, if you can increase that, it gives you chance to hit the ball harder further. So I mean, and when you hit the ball hard, like coaches always say, when you hit the ball hard, good things will happen, right? But if you can hit it harder, I mean, that's like, why are we training, right? Obviously, we're training to get people to move more efficiently and stuff, but like creatine will help from a whole system-wide expression. Yeah. Right. I mean, and that's the thing is like, I know with training and stuff, we're like individual pieces to try and integrate it into the system. Well, to help you do a whole system physiological movement, rotational power, running, I mean, what jumping, whatever it is. And what's cool is that'll make an impact to help that whole system do that.
100%. 100%. I mean, even aesthetics. What is, an extra couple pounds over the first month of, what does an extra couple pounds of lean mass look like, of muscle mass look like for you? And I mean, there's so many benefits there, right? And you get into too, there's weight gain with creatine. Yeah, there should be, right? Because it's helping you put on more lean mass, more muscle mass, right? We should see that. Like, weight is not a bad thing,
right?
I think,
that's interesting too, man.
I think we fail to look at body composition so much, and we say, scale's going this way, scale's going that way. It's like the scale is hugely important if we can use it properly. It's a very effective tool for monitoring energy balance. We have to use it properly, and we have to think. Right. Well, scale number hasn't moved, right? But like, you're in a deficit. You just started training. You're putting on lean mass, and maybe a little bit of fat mass is coming off, and we're able to do that because we're relatively untrained or detrained or whatever.
Right.
Those things are hard to do together when we're super trained. That's a technical term, super trained.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. There's a book called Super Training.
Oh,
great book.
But yeah, I mean, you're gonna see improvements in lean mass and muscle mass, and people go, creatine just adds water weight, right? That's a common one that we get. When you see people or hear people, when you hear people citing studies that say, this creatine didn't cause an increase in water weight, that's code for this creatine didn't work.
That's funny. Simply put.
Pro tip. That's why you have to understand this stuff. Think about it. Right. But what happens is your muscles have a high water content. Okay. You push solute into your muscles, like creatine, sodium, things like that. Water is going to come up to maintain concentration gradients. Right. But as we add muscle tissue, right, more of these fibers coming in, we have to have more water in our muscles. Okay. You're not going to you don't see bodybuilders who are like 250 and 4% body fat, like just massive dudes. It's not like their muscles have no water anymore. Right. Cause like their muscles are now 2% water because there's so much of it in there. Right. And so what we see is there is a proportional increase in water, as we add muscle mass with creatine, especially over the long term.
Right.
So it's just not a concern. We would expect to see some of those increases in weight, some increases in water in our muscles proportional to the amount of muscle that we add.
For sure. Which is interesting. Yeah, I love that, man. That's super cool, man. This was super, super helpful. I think it's been very informative for people just to hear the different things we talked about. And I mean, overall, the impact of creatine, whether it's safe or not, all types of things, I think they were addressed really well by Scott. I think what's cool about that is when you can get quality information, take that. And the fun thing about this is you're watching this, you can reach out to him for questions. I mean, there's so many ways to get a hold of him when it comes to like, if you're not even in the state of Washington, he's like, oh,
Yeah.
we can do something.
We work with athletes down to California, over to Florida, up the coast, you name it, programs all over for sure. And I think the only thing we didn't test on is, especially, I mean, if you're an athlete, if you're not an athlete, if you're tested, if you're not tested, third-party certified stuff.
Yeah, man.
So NSF certified for sport, informed choice, informed sport, those kind of things.
We use all that.
I mean, I think that's key, especially if you're a tested athlete. Like you can't be using other stuff. You can't mess around with that because you'll lose time competing, right? You're in college, you'll lose a year, right? You get popped, if you're higher than that, whatever. So third party test it, make sure that what's on the label is actually right, is what's in there and nothing else, because there's so much problem with contamination in the sports supplement market. It is regulated. The FDA doesn't have enough time to test everything. So there's a lot of spot checks and stuff like that. Third party tested, it's not that difficult. I mean, creatine is so stinking affordable, right? Like you look at, whey protein powder these days is like probably one of the most affordable sources of protein out there. Creatine is probably one of the most affordable supplements out there. Optimum Nutrition, Muscle Farm, creatine monohydrate, sometimes they call it micronized creatine, but creatine monohydrate is what you can see. It's so stinking affordable. It's potentially beneficial. Understand how to take it. I just reach out to somebody who's knowledgeable, right? Like the person selling you the stuff is probably not the person to also get your, guidance from, because they don't have the time to know you, to understand what you're trying to do, to go through that process. And there's also a source of bias potentially.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that would just be the last kind of plug there is creatine monohydrate, know about it, understand it. It very well may be beneficial for you if you have any sort of, resistance training goal, anything like that. If you're strength power oriented, sprint oriented, whatever. Understand it. I love that we're doing this. I mean, this is huge, right? You have the opportunity here to listen, go figure this stuff out.
I think it's crucial, I think it's from Scott's a good dude. I feel like I'm a good dude. We're trying to be truly honest and give you some real information,
I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not getting paid to say anything. I don't represent, Optimum Nutrition, Muscle Farm, whatever. I go to them. There's others out there. Amazon Prime, Costco, like they're highly available. They're super affordable.
Right.
I mean, that's why we go to stuff. We do this stuff because you're trying to educate. I love that you do this. This is super cool. That's why I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Well, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Vitalnutrition.com, VITL nutrition.com. That's the easy one. You can reach out. All my info's there. Instagram, I'm okay with social media. If you reach out, I'll respond eventually. Scott Littlefield 1, longest driver. You can call Curtis. I'm sure he'll link you. I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
No, you could. Yeah, just message me and be like, oh, here's a profile share.
But yeah, no, 100%. You reach out, I'll get back to you.
Love it, dude. Dude, appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. I think it's a very important topic. And for some reason, like I said before we started, I feel like this creatine question I've noticed comes in waves. Like it goes away and then it comes back. And I think this would be a good information for people to really lock in. So I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Curtis.
All right, guys. Well, this is Curtis and Scott signing out, and we'll see you next time.
Grace.